Last Christmas, my wife was given a book by one of her clients. It was Charlie Mackesy's book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse. And I started to read it and realized it was full, not just of wonderful drawings, pen and ink drawings, sketches, and lots of comments and conversations which were of real use really to everyone, and particularly to someone like me working with people in senior roles in organizations. Anyway, I used it with Charlie's agreement as a basis for some work I was doing with a group of senior executives when I was out in the United States in the Rockies back in January. And we used it as a backdrop to some of our discussions. I then posted a little piece about it on LinkedIn and received quite a lot of comments, both about the book, which was great, and also about some of the things that I'd said, using the book as a, if you like, as a backdrop to some of the comments that I was making. And so I thought I'd like to just share in a bit more detail why it is that I think this book speaks to us, people, the human race, speaks to the human condition, particularly with the current situation we're all facing, but probably even more than that, with a need to perhaps reflect and look differently, particularly from a leadership, in how we lead people, how we lead our organizations, how we lead ourselves. So for those of you who are not familiar with the book, I'm just going to I'm going to take you on the journey that the book takes us. I'm not going to read all of it. There isn't time, but I am going to sort of pull out little bits that I think are really meaningful, particularly in this current moment. So the book starts with the boy and the three other characters, the mole, the fox, and the horse, being introduced to us. And in the book, Charlie says the boy is lonely when he meets the mole. So here's a little boy who's lonely. That little boy could be any of us. And he meets the mole, and they spend some time together. And the mole is one of these rather sort of wise individuals who maybe you don't see as being wise immediately, but says the most wonderful things and then brings it all down to earth, because as you'll find out as the story progresses, the mole is fixated on cake, rather like me, I suppose, totally fixated on cake. And particularly when you've had several Zoom meetings, all you can think of is grabbing a cup of coffee and perhaps eat a cake or a biscuit. But the mole is fixated on cake. And they spend some time together and looking at the wild. And the wild is a place a bit like life. It's frightening. Sometimes it's worrying, but it's also beautiful. And so many of the comments that are made throughout the book reflect back on frightening circumstances, but also things that can be very beautiful, and how we deal with those two parts of the same environment in which we live. And in their wanderings, they meet a fox. Now, the fox is quite a secretive person. The fox represents someone who's perhaps been dealt a difficult hand by society. He's a bit suspicious. He's actually saved from death by the mole in the story. And the fox just is with them on the journey, but doesn't say a great deal. And finally, there's the horse, this enormous animal, this larger-than-life beast that's just full of gentleness and helps them on the journey. And it was interesting, Ira Morris, in one of his conversations about horses the other day in leadership development, the horse was this significant animal, just quietly making sense of things and weighing us up. Well, the horse is a bit like that in this story. So they start the journey, the boy and the mole, and the mole starts to talk to the boy. They start this conversation before they've met the fox. And the mole says to the boy, "I've learned how to be in the present." And the boy says, How have you done that? And the mole says, "I find a quiet spot, I shut my eyes, and I breathe." And I reflected back on those moments in Colorado and how important it was for people to have some time just to sit quietly, look admittedly at a wonderful landscape, and breathe, and just have time to gather their thoughts, have time to think about who they really are, what they wanted to do, maybe what they wanted to say to colleagues, family, friends, and how important that is. And how often we just rush from one thing to another. One of the things that perhaps lockdown has shown us is that actually having a bit of time, is maybe frightening, but also beautiful, that we have an opportunity just to reflect on what we're doing. So the mole says he finds this quiet spot and he breathes. That's good, said the boy. And then? And the mole says, then I focus. Then I really start to think about it. And this is the bit I love about this book. There's comedy all the way through it. And what do you focus on, says the boy. And of course, the mole says cake. That's his main driver. That's what he wants. But the learning from me is just taking time to sit quietly, to breathe, and to focus. It's really, really important. And there's another element of this that I think is something that we pass over in our desire to be the person who takes the lead, who makes the decisions, to be seen to be infallible. We can often be quite hard on ourselves when the reality that faces us is not what we were hoping for, that maybe we're not quite as brilliant as we thought we were, or that some of the decisions we've made haven't worked out quite as well. And by now, the fox has joined the boy and the mole, and they're wandering along, and it's sort of dusk time, it's in the evening. And the mole says to the others, being kind to yourself is one of the greatest kindnesses. How often are we kind to ourselves? How often do we spend time beating ourselves up about things, when really what we want to do is just say, hey, come on, sit back, reflect, breathe a little bit, and recognize that in amongst all the things that you might be annoyed about, frustrated about, beating yourself up about, there are lots of things you're doing that other people rarely appreciate. Be kind to yourself. Give yourself a break. And the story goes on. And this is I want to show you one of the pictures that I used in Colorado, because it seemed to resonate with this group, senior executives in a very large, successful company. And I showed this picture one morning, and the picture is this. And I don't know how easy it is to see that, but the picture is of the horse, because the horse has come along and joined the group, and the fox is just trotting along by the horse, and the mole and the little boy are sitting on the horse. And the boy plucks up the courage to ask the horse the following question: what is the bravest thing you've ever said? And the horse just quietly, plodding along the track, says, help. And that might be surprising to many of us, that asking for help is something that we as leaders should do. One of the conversations we're having soon is with Professor Michael West of Lancaster University, and he's going to be having a conversation with a colleague of ours, Anne, about compassionate leadership. And I think recognizing that asking for help is actually a strength rather than a weakness is something we really do need to think about, to consider, and to take on board. Because that just single word, help, might be taken by some as a sign of weakness. But the horse goes on to explain, and explain in a way that certainly makes sense to me. Asking for help isn't giving up, says the horse. It's refusing to give up. It's showing that you really want to succeed. However tough the problem is, however difficult the situation, you really want to succeed at it. And by asking for help, you'll recognize that you don't have all the answers, that other people may have had a similar experience and have found a solution, or maybe just by sharing the load with people you trust, they in turn can perhaps make suggestions, proffer support, which will enable you to get through the situation that you're facing as a leader. But that applies to any of us, whether we're in leadership roles or not. Asking for help is refusing to give up. And then a little bit further on, the mole comes back, and the mole is still fixated on cake. And the mole says, I've discovered something better than cake. And the boy is really quite incredulous. No, you haven't, said the boy. I have, replied the mole. I certainly have. What is it? And the mole says, a hug. It lasts longer. And that made me sort of think about the number of times that we go for instant gratification because it helps us to feel good, and why not? But actually, sometimes doing something that's a little bit deeper, doing something that's a bit more than just saying hi to someone or maybe casually asking them how they are, however nice that is. Maybe just getting a bit deeper is really what it's about. Showing that we genuinely care. A hug, because it lasts longer. And by now, the 4 characters in this story are really into it. They're all in different ways enjoying the journey. And they're sitting on the horse, the 3 of them. The lovely little drawing of the horse lying down, and the little boy and the mole and the fox are sitting on the horse's back, looking at the countryside in the distance, the beautiful wild in this case. And the horse, ruminating and sitting there quietly, says, "Nothing beats kindness. It sits quietly beyond all things." And so often we think of kindness perhaps as being a sign of weakness. You need to be tougher. You need to toughen yourself up. You need to, take a grip. And yet actually expressing kindness, we can still be quite tough sometimes. We can still take decisions that may be difficult for us to take and might impact on people's lives. But we don't have to be unpleasant. We don't have to be unkind. And I did a little talk about feedback last week, which will be on Let's Talk Leadership at some point. And one of the comments we often make when we're talking about feedback is that be kind. You can be direct. You can give feedback that other people may feel is a bit tough to receive, but you're doing it out of kindness because you're trying to help them rather than doing it from a sense of just getting back at them or criticizing them or judgmental. So nothing beats kindness. It sits quietly beyond all things. And a little bit later, they're taking a rest under a tree, and the boy whispers to the mole and to the horse, because he doesn't want the fox to hear. He says, "The fox never really speaks." And the horse, again, wise, gentle, kind, says, "No, and it's lovely he's with us. It's lovely he's with us." And that helped me, that comment really brought me up and helped me reflect that how often are the people that we work with, people in our teams, people we lead, colleagues, who don't say a great deal. They may be quite quiet, they may be quite introverted, but they don't say a great deal. But when they do, it's meaningful. It's often sheds a light, throws a light on something. In adaptive leadership terms, we talk about listening to unusual voices. Sometimes the quiet person is the person who has the greatest insight, and they've just been finding a moment, an opportunity when they can summon up the courage when everyone else around them is talking, summon up the courage to say, "Hold on a moment, how about?" So it's lovely he's with us. And the fox hears this. None of us are completely deaf necessarily to some of the comments or actions that people make. Sometimes they pretend that we haven't seen it, but we have. "To be honest, I often feel I have nothing interesting to say," said the fox. "Being honest is always interest," said the horse. And I thought how helpful that bit of advice is in a leadership context, that proffering advice, being honest when you do so, saying it as you see it, without being critical or judgmental of other people, is a really, really positive and helpful thing to do. And towards the end of the book, it gets even deeper. And I just wanted to finish off by sharing a couple of thoughts. And as I say, if you haven't seen the book, get a copy. It's wonderful. So towards the end of the book, and the journey's coming near the end, what's your best discovery, asked them all. That I'm enough as I am. So he's been through this journey with his friends, and that's the conclusion he's come to. He's learnt that I'm enough as I am. I can't always be brilliant at everything. I am who I am. I try my hardest. I'm kind. I reach out to other people. I listen to them. And maybe that's enough. And the horse finishes with this. Always remember you matter. You're important and you are loved. And you bring to this world things no one else can. We are all unique. We all have something to contribute. And our role, I think, as leaders, in whatever position we're in, is to recognize that around us there are unique individuals, all of whom have something to contribute. And if we listen to them more and we show more kindness, even when we have to be tough, it may just help us be better leaders. So we're going to continue this conversation on Let's Talk Leadership. We'd love you to take part. You may disagree with some of the stuff I've just been talking about. You may have read the book and had a different viewpoint. You may have read another book, not a business book, not something out of a business school or out of a business journal, just something that's touched you, something that's meaningful. Share it with us. Film yourself talking about it and let us share it on the website, because conversations are really important. Thanks.